Bezosism. It's a new term that I can't say without having a stroke that was coined by the Wall Street Journal journalist Christopher Mims. Although it might sound like a new variant, it's in fact a new philosophy that incentivizes all Amazon warehouse workers across the world. I've worked in a warehouse before and it's hard work a lot of the time, but if you were caught slacking, then the boss would give you a good talking to.
You are by far the worst employee I've ever had. You will amount to nothing and live out the rest of your life as nothing more than a failure. Anyway, have a good weekend.
Imagine having a boss that only judges you based on the efficiency to perform set tasks. Always watching your every move and keeping track of your time. Well, that is the reality for many workers in the world already, but this boss of yours is only human and understands your limitations. You could be going through a tough time at home, caring for someone, or suffering from a minor injury, but still able to work. This boss of yours should at least put these limitations into consideration before showing you the door. But now imagine that your boss is a machine from a dystopian future with glowing red eyes and a hatred for your colleague John Connor. You'd have a pretty tough time getting any kind of empathy from them, and if caught slacking, would be terminated faster than you can say, Alright, enough of these cheesy Terminator memes. What Amazon has implemented recently is essentially an algorithm that brings up stats on your performance at work. They use this to see if you're making rates, which is Amazon slang for getting the job done at or above the expected performance rate. What this means is that your boss is essentially data, and if you were to dip below the expected rate, you'd be flagged on the system and risk getting a strike. And if you know anything about Wii Sports, too many strikes and you're out. They track their workers via numerous sensors. The data from this is compiled to make an average of the combined performance of all workers in the facility. This is starting to sound like a dystopian future, except it's already here, and this DC villain is fully on board with it. But is it really such a bad thing? I mean, Amazon is well known for their wonderful work environment, with employee turnover rates roughly over 150% per year, where most businesses can only get up to 12 to 15. I mean, they're really setting a record at this point. All jokes aside, warehouse workers at Amazon have had it pretty tough throughout the years, with dreadful pay, long shifts, timed fulfillment schedules, limited short breaks, and a strike system that couldn't give a shit if you're dying from illness. The philosophy of Amazon's work environment is quite simply this: if you can't give it your all every hour of the shift, then you can fuck off. And of course, people still apply for jobs at these Amazon warehouses because some people either have no choice or genuinely enjoy the grind, which sounds crazy, but it's true. There are people that enjoy the shifts and actually don't mind working in the warehouses at all. Christopher Mims actually interviewed a 50-year-old man who enjoyed the work even while under the watchful eye of his robotic overlord. He says this: "It was 10 hours of pretty much mind-numbingly boring work, pretty much standing in the same position for the whole shift. But at the end of the shift, I was drenched in sweat and aching like I hadn't ached since I was playing competitive soccer." So it's clear that some people do enjoy or at least put up with the work, and in this man's case, as well as probably many others, the experience is of course quite subjective. However, this man was pushed to his limits and fell on his knees on the job due to the high pressure to make rate. We've had a brief look into this newly crowned philosophy of Bezosism. I still can't pronounce that properly. But how does it actually work? Each fulfillment center, or warehouse for short, is filled with a bunch of different sensors that track the activity of each employee. This could be anything from taking items off the shelves, putting them back, packing them, or even taking a shit. The data from these sensors allows Amazon to calculate the combined performance of every employee within a specific warehouse. This then sets a floating rate for everyone to work towards or succeed. So not every warehouse is the same. Some might have a lower rate than others, because it's based on the data recorded by all workers within a specific warehouse. But what if you don't perform to the standards set by this algorithm? Well, you'll be flagged on the system and could risk getting a strike. There's no human aspect to this at all, but actually there kind of is. To prevent everybody getting vaporized by the algorithm left, right, and center, the warehouse managers hold a couple stand-up meetings throughout the day. They will bring up the stats for each employee and address any up-and-coming or already existing warnings. These warnings are of course flagged up on the system, and they actually present this to the team. What I found genuinely fascinating whilst watching an interview with Christopher Mims is that the human managers actually end up playing good cop against the cold, emotionless algorithm. There's already this idea that the algorithm is this evil overlord even within the company, and the human managers are there to be the voice of reason. But at the end of the day, the algorithm is still the boss, and it decides who gets a strike and who doesn't. I hope you're beginning to understand how creepy all of this is. The workers know what's going on and how it works. There is a full sense of transparency, which is the least that Amazon can do for their workers. Having a machine track and judge you based on your performance is, in my opinion, pretty disturbing. And if it wasn't for the human managers, this would feel just like an episode out of Black Mirror, even though I'm still getting that vibe regardless. I just hope they don't turn this new robot boss into a walking machine. But more importantly, how does this impact Amazon's warehouse workers today? Well, firstly, pop star Pitbull Bezos said in a letter to shareholders that we don't set unreasonable performance goals. And before you call BS on that statement, this is technically true, as at least within the warehouses, the performance is based on the average rate set by the employees. However, this statement means absolutely nothing when you look at the mental and physical stress that the new system presents. With a 10-hour shift, you get a 30-minute break with 2 15-minute rest breaks. When you're doing the same thing over and over again, you'll eventually develop repetitive injuries which can impact the speed at which you work. Not to mention if you have another job, for example, on the side due to low pay, and find yourself exhausted to the point where you just can't make rate. Making rate is a term that looms over every one of these workers' heads. There's this conditioned fear of not making rate, which creates this weird sense of paranoia where workers will work as fast as they can so that they don't fall behind. Not to mention that in a lot of facilities, especially in America, they have free vending machines for both coffee and painkillers. Kinda says a lot, doesn't it? Like I said earlier, the man in his 50s who enjoyed the work ended up on his knees due to overdoing it. He went pale in the face and clammy in the hands, and the worst part about this is that it came up on the system as time off task, which would impact his stats and could risk a strike. You can't even fall down ill without being punished. In fact, you're not even allowed to sit down outside of your breaks. Poor guy. He did eventually quit the job though, after getting carpal tunnel, and was there for only 6 weeks. The issue here is that even though his supervisors weren't putting any pressure on him, the idea of not making rate caused him to put pressure on himself. This isn't a single case scenario though. A lot of people working in Amazon warehouses feel the same. Although Amazon doesn't set the bar, it probably would have been better if they did, because then people would work to a set standard instead of a moving goalpost. Amazon has made it very clear throughout the years that it runs on a philosophy of high performance first, employee welfare second. That employees should be pushed to the limit and those that fall behind should start looking elsewhere. This new work philosophy of Bezosism, which I still can't pronounce properly, doesn't really change anything. While editing this video, I actually found a pretty amazing channel called NFC Productions, hosted by this guy Dylan. He has a bunch of very good videos where he gives his opinion, his own take on actually working at one of these fulfillment centers. Even a day in the life video where he takes us through quite literally the whole shift, the whole 10 hours. Thank God he sped that up. There's also another channel called Life at the White House where this guy also takes us through his shift, gives us an idea of what it's actually like working in one of these warehouses. They both make it very clear that on a physical level, it is a very physically demanding job. Life at the White House recorded over 24,000 steps in the day, which sounds great if you want to burn some calories, but it does seem like a very knackering job to start off with. A whole 10-hour shift with, in total, just a 1-hour break makes what I do seem even more unhealthy than it already is. But Dylan himself actually had a few good points regarding the rate, and here they are.
Amazon gives us like this performance sheet, and this sheet has a list of names of all the employees that are working the same shift that I'm on. And the way it works is that Amazon records each employee's productivity on the paper by using a percentage, and it lists the names out in order from most to least efficient. So ideally you want to be at 100% or at the top of the page. This means that you're meeting Amazon's expected rates. Typically, I hover at about 100 to 114%, but I always notice that collectively as a building, the majority of employees do not reach the 100% mark. And when I say the majority, I mean 75 to 80% of the names on that paper are below 100%. So all they do is write some note at the top of the page saying like names under 70%, please increase rate. So to me, as a worker, all I'm seeing is that most of us cannot get to 100%. So why is the expected rate still so high? The way I see it, if only 25% of us can actually get to your number, just lower the number. So yeah, I think it's an overall sneaky tactic that Amazon uses, and I hate how they just don't lower their expectations.
I highly recommend you go check these channels out after this, but Dylan made some pretty good points. He's one of the high performers and he makes above rate, and that about 75 to 80% of people don't actually even make rate. The frustrating part about that is that he doesn't really need to put in that amount of work to just get through the day. He still gets paid the same amount. There is no reward system for being a high performer. So there's this weird dynamic that you have people who are, obviously that everyone's doing their job, everyone's trying to get their job done. Some people are a bit slower than others. But then you have these high performers that prove that you can actually make that rate, that it is achievable, but only the very lowest on the list are in risk of getting flagged and getting a strike. I'm no professional when it comes to how warehouses work in general, but if there was a clear set standard, a clear expectation of the pace of which you must work, then everybody can at least try and achieve to stick to that pace and not have to push any further to go over. If there's no incentive like there is at Amazon at the moment, no extra rewards or any kind of pats on the back for performing higher than everybody else, then what's the point? The questions I have about this and things that I think we can also talk about in the comments below is, where will this lead us? The thing is about this whole philosophy is that it works. In fact, it works surprisingly well. The systems that they had before were pretty much the same, but a lot more primitive. Workers were still tracked and timed, but now it's like that on steroids. Where will this lead us? Will this new way of working become a new thing for most, if not all, blue-collar jobs? And are we going to see performance trackers implemented in the office space too? The scary part about this is the endless possibilities to which this kind of technology will infest our lives as it grows. If you like the video, like it. If you dislike it, go and tell me in the comments below, because this button does absolutely bugger all. Thanks for watching, and I know I've been away for a little bit. Content has been pretty slow, but I've been working on something that will hopefully not get copyright claimed to absolute shit. See you next week. Goodbye.